Peace, peace, peace. Welcome to Kalaparusha Astrology YouTube channel, where we keep our eyes to the sky and ears to the street. We appreciate you stopping in today, and we definitely have a great topic for discussion. We're going to cover the March 29th, 2025 solar eclipse. And we got a lot of great conversation to get into just regarding the things that have already transpired and what's going to transpire here in the near future. Of course, always make sure you hit that like, subscribe, and also share the video. Of course, if you feel free or if you feel like it, comment. Please share your ideas, thoughts, and insights as far as the information is concerned. But to get started, today's topic is, of course, on a solar eclipse, and solar eclipses are something that are somewhat a rare event. They're not uncommon, but they only happen twice a year. And of course, they're followed by, or either followed by, or led by a lunar eclipse. But eclipses are very important solar, or excuse me, astrological activities in that what they do is they basically kind of open portals, right? They give an opportunity for things to come in from the other side. And when I say the other side, I mean the inner planes, or what we call the spiritual world. And also, what it does is it creates sudden events, and it also reveals things that have been hidden for quite some time. You know, it unlocks secrets. And so it's a very important solar eclipse that's coming up because, of course, this is the last one that we're going to have in Pisces for the next 18 and a half years. So it's going to be a while till we see this particular astrological alignment again. One of the things that we notice is that this particular eclipse is very special because it has some kind of peculiarities that happen with it, and we're going to get into those things today. It's been aligned with a stellium, which is very rare. I mean, it happened a few years back, and of course, it happened previously. We're going to get into those dates and times as to when what happened in those eclipses, and what was the outcome of those transactions. But nonetheless, what we're going to also do is kind of go through a little slideshow here today, and we're just going to kind of, breeze through and have a little fun with regards to the information in a visual way, instead of me just talking and you hearing my beautiful voice and seeing my beautiful face here. But let's go ahead and get started. So without further ado, we can see here that world change is afoot, right? This is a time where things are going to shift and pivot in a major way, and as if they haven't already. But this is a time where from now on, it's almost going to be where we won't be able to go backwards anymore, or we won't be able to return to the same way of life. Interestingly enough, it happens in Pisces, and Pisces is a very spiritual sign. It's a sign that definitely gives us some resolve and some, in a way, some peace of mind. But Pisces has some heavy implications that go along with it as well. And so, looking at this, one of the particulars of this particular eclipse is that it happens at 14 degrees 53 minutes Pisces. And so, with this happening like this, the last time, of course, this occurred was over the last 18 and a half years. It's a partial solar eclipse. So it's not a full eclipse like the last one we've had here in America. Last total solar eclipse was in 2024. This one's only a partial. And so partials are a little bit different. They still hold weight, right? Just because it's not a full total solar eclipse or an annular eclipse, it still holds weight. It's only visible in very small portions of the planet or the globe. It was visible in Northeast America, right around in Maine, right? Parts of Maine, of course, London, England, Russia, and also Canada as well. It lasted for approximately, or right around 1 hour and 46 minutes. And it was actually, this is based on Presque Isle, Maine. And I use this particular point because it's the furthest east we can go in the United States of America. And at that point, or where that is, you can actually kind of see there's a little bit more of the sun's disk that's covered. But the way we use this information is that we kind of time the eclipse and see how long it lasts. And so the eclipse lasted an hour and 46 minutes. Now, we just kind of round that up. 46 minutes is it's closer to 2 hours. So we can give or take, a 2 year period that we're going to see these changes occur over. Interestingly enough, as I stated earlier, there's a planetary alignment that happens with this particular eclipse. And so it's something that is really calling us to pay attention to. And not only that, what's so special is on the eclipse, the day of, Saturn ingresses into Pisces, right? So it's almost like Pisces or Saturn's entering into that sign with a greeting, right, from the sun, moon, and the other planets that are there. And so this is also something to consider because this doesn't happen very often with solar eclipses. Now, the peculiars is that the last time this happened, the last type of eclipse that happened like this with a stellium was December 25th, 2019. And this actually opened a portal for COVID. So right after that, January is when the first kind of information of the waves hit. And then, of course, after that, the rest is history. Of course, several planets were involved, and we're going to get into what those were and what that meant and how it affected the world. But another major eclipse like this happened on February 4th, 1962, right? And one of the things that what happens is with these stelliums, it's so important and so impactful is because planets, right, govern different areas of our life. And not only do they govern different areas of our life, but they also rule various houses of a person's chart. And so when you have several planets at once coalescing with a kind of explosive or a kind of volatile shifting of energies, then all these other areas, right, will be impacted simultaneously. So if you consider, 5 or 6 major planets, that means, the majority of the areas of your chart are going to be affected in a major way. So this is why this is so heavy and so impactful. So looking at the solar eclipse here that happened February 4th, 1962, one of the implications here is that there weren't any outer planets involved in it, meaning Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto, but all of the planets that are inner planets were involved. So this is very interesting, right? And you can see, right, that it happens in the second house of America's chart. And you can also see, if you look very closely here, that it is conjunct K2, right? It's conjunct Pluto, which has a lot of weight when with regards to what Pluto means. And so the solar eclipse, right? Several planets were in Capricorn. It's the second house of the United States of America. It conjunct Pluto, and that's Pluto is a very volatile planet. It makes major things happen. It's not considered a planet in some talks of astronomy, but for all intents and purposes, over the last century, it's been working very well for mundane astrology purposes. And we only use it for mundane astrology. We don't get into it in the personal sense because it doesn't affect us or impact us on a personal level. But in the grand sense, it does. And Pluto being right there with Saturn and Mars are very heavy implications for that time. It was a nodal return, so that's also something that holds weight. And K2 is really the culprit of this particular portal. Again, Mars and Saturn were conjunct Pluto, and they're at this time, which is very key. This is when the Cuban Missile Crisis was abating, and so this is a very intense time in America. You can imagine having potential or nuclear weapons, in your backyard as a nation. This is very alarming, and at the time, because nukes were still fairly newly proliferated, this was a big challenge to the American people at the time, to the American government rather. And so, considering this, right, these stelliums hold a lot of weight. What's interesting is that almost 7 months later, right? And the thing about eclipses, the interesting thing is that you have to watch the actual opposite degrees of where that eclipse takes place. So if it's in Pisces, you watch when planets transit Virgo, right? Because that is the opposite effect of the eclipse. Well, here we have it, October, which is it's a month or so after, but still fairly close to that opposite point. We have one of the closest times that world nuclear war was going to happen. October 28th, 1962. You can go Google this stuff. It's Wikipedia. It's on Wikipedia. It's out there. But the research shows that this was a very intense time. It was almost to the point where the switch was hit, and we would have had a very different outcome conversation following that. Excuse me. So this is very indicative of what we're going to see here in the next couple of years. Now, this eclipse, right, some of us or most of us are probably familiar with it, happened on Christmas in 2019. And a lot of people were talking about the implications of what was to come, something major, something was going. Some people actually predicted something of an illness or something of a worldwide pandemic. But nonetheless, this is what opened that portal, right? And you can see um, these planets are all in the ascendant of America. They're all in the first house. Saturn, of course, is a piece of the puzzle, and K2 is also the one that opens the portal up this time as well. And considering, right, this is a time that really shook America. I mean, it shook the world. The whole world was on the same program on the same time. Um, the interesting thing is that when we look at these particular eclipses, the sign plays a big role, but we also really have to look at the nakshatra. The nakshatra, the star that's connected to this, really gives us the real hidden keys to understanding what this particular placement means. And so the nakshatra that's tied to this particular um, event is Mula. And Mula is between 0 degrees to 13 to 20 minutes Sagittarius. And so this particular nakshatra, this portion of Sagittarius is very impactful. It's ruled by the goddess of calamity called Nariti, and she's tied to Mula. This is the deity that rules this particular star. And this star, right, considering, right, Shani was part of the recipe, but this star implicates calamities. So when you look at and tie in the nakshatra and the deity, you can see why this particular transaction was so heavy on the world. Right? It happened at 10 degrees Sag. It's only 2 degrees difference from America's chart, America's ascendant degree. So, of course, the world was impacted. It's not just about America, but it definitely was a wake-up call for a lot of people here. Saturn and Pluto were conjunct within 2 degrees. Again, Pluto seems to be showing up on the scene when we're talking about these major changes. Of course, occurred in Sagittarius, which is a sign of travel and expansion. And, COVID really took off because of that. The travel, moving from place to place. We live in a time where every part of the world is connected in some way. So travel, of course, is how these things spread. And by far, right, we see the result of what happened when it left one country and entered another. Of course, Jupiter is the ruler of this particular eclipse, and it's the ruler of the eclipse that's here or that has happened on the 29th of March. So kind of interesting that, Jupiter rules both of these, but Pisces has some very interesting things. And the themes that come along with Pisces, it's the culmination of the zodiac. It's the last sign, right? So it's kind of like everything that has come to this point in the past is recognized in this sign. It deals in transcendence, meaning it deals in going from or leaving from some place and moving on to another. transitioning, if you will. It deals in facing deeper realities, right? About ourselves, about the world around us. It wants us to get into things and go research and go off into what we need to find as far as finding our true self. It moves beyond our ego and our personal drives. It really calls us to task to let our personal things go, right? Um, it wants us to let go of antiquated and outdated things and begin to accept what we can't change. It also deals with surrender, closure, right? Preparing, right, for new beginnings, meaning you can't move into a new space until you let some things go, right? Not everybody can go where you're going, in other words. Spirituality is a big topic of Pisces. That's one of the focuses that we really look upon when we talk about, the two fish swimming in opposite directions, reconciling opposites. Spirituality is to help us to bring us to a center, right? A calming of sorts to where we can, reason the dualities within ourselves, within life. It's about removing illusions, right? It's about or it could be diving into illusions depending on how the chart is placed or how planets are set up, but it definitely deals in the world of dreams, right? Things that aren't real. And it really requires for us to release emotional baggage. This eclipse is really focusing on what doesn't work, right? And what doesn't work has to be removed. This is a process that is a little bit more comfortable because it's in a nakshatra that is less challenging, but still nonetheless letting go is never easy, especially when we're attached to our pleasures and our ideas of what we think we should have. Self-reflection, of course, as well, right? This is another theme that Pisces deals with, but the nakshatra that is tied to this eclipse is 14 degrees 55 minutes. It's Uttara Bhadrapada. It's the serpent of the deep. And the serpent of the deep, it's ruled by Saturn, right? So this particular star is a very profound star. It's not one that is very gregarious in the sense of externalization. Pisces is not a sign that deals in externalizing. It's really one that focuses on the behind the scenes and the unconscious. It's considered the wisest of the nakshatras, which is interesting to have an eclipse there. Right? And I know it seems, well, what does that really mean? Like, it seems like it's a lot softer. And it can be, considering some of the things that are coming, but a little further implication, it does rule sacrifice, right? It rules charity. So, giving and really seeking nothing in return, giving without any type of expectations, is really, right, what this particular nakshatra is calling to task. And it's the final part of the final path. It's the last where we figure it out and we're able to move on into higher understandings and ways of living. It's symbolized by a funeral cot, a deathbed, and it's telling you that, in Jyotish, in astrology, there's two nakshatras that indicate what we call a cot or a bed that's comfortable and one that's not comfortable, right? One that causes us to face reality. The other one allows us to exist and bask in our triumphs. We're talking about Purva Falguni and Uttara Falguni. Those are two nakshatras that represent a bed or a hammock, right? Or someplace where you lay. This does as well, but this is the end of the zodiac. So it represents that part of us where we lay down to really change and transition into new things. So the deity is Ahir-Budnya, and Ahir-Budnya is it's called the serpent of the deep, but it's very strange because they also tie it to thunderstorms or thunderous rain clouds. And so it's an atmospheric entity. It's tied to Purvapadhadrapada, which is the previous nakshatra that exists in the most part from at the end of Aquarius and the very beginning of Pisces. And they're tied together. The first one is very intense, and this one is a lot more mild, but it represents the newly embodied life force of a crown king. And so you have to understand what this is kind of symbolizing is that, one of the ceremonies that they would do in India in ancient times is coronate the king, and they would take water from 16 different places and pour it all into one vessel. And then they would take that water and then take the water and pour it over the king to renew or to kind of imbibe him and give him his powers to be powers that are going to be at his disposal as a king. So it represents literally coming into a new existence, right? It represents the newly embodied life force. In other words, you've gone through all of the challenges, the processes that you've had to go through to come to the culmination of what you're dealing with in life, whatever it may be, whatever area that it's dealing in. If it's the first house, it could be you personally for Pisces ascendant. For Virgo, it could be the culmination of something dealing with your relationship or your partnership or marriage. But whatever it is, it represents something that we're dealing with, that we're coming to a finalization in order to do something new. And it's a member of one of the 11 Rudras. The Rudras are tied to Shiva, the god of destruction, and the god of the yogi, right? The meditative master. One of these Rudras, well, there's 11 of them, but this one is a very powerful one, is that its emphasis is on justice. So think about world justice. Think about justice in the sense of not personal justice, but justice in the sense of moving beyond things that are not working for humanity, judging things that have not worked and saying this is no longer going to be done. Again, its emphasis is on justice. It spreads wisdom, and it spreads the message. So it gets it out. It's telling you. It's a warning, right? I hear Bunyat in this sense as giving humanity a warning, a wake-up call, an opportunity to realize how far we've come and how far we have to go as a planet, as a globe. It causes us to, well, really, excuse me, it's where we go into the depths of our unconscious. It's the bottom of our, the ocean. It's the depths of our spirit. And it causes us to face anything, right, that is repressed or unacknowledged. So anything that we really didn't want to face, it's now here. It's going to come out in the next couple of years. If it's repressed issues around something that happened in your childhood or something that happened when you were very first starting out in your dating, when you met somebody and they did something and you don't really remember how it impacted you, and now it's being brought forth, or something that maybe happened in school. Things that are really repressed and deep have a lot of impact on our behaviors, and this is a time when those things will come to light for most of us. It's a worldwide deep and profound change and reorientation, right? It's a pivoting of our thinking, and the Shakti, the power that's tied to this, is Varshadamayana Shakti, which is the power to bring about rain. So it's going to cause intense weather patterns, and this will be a point of concern for the next couple of years, meaning that the aftermath of what will happen with regards to these particular storms. Now, interestingly enough, here recently, I believe the day of the eclipse, there was a earthquake in Myanmar over in Indonesia, or near Indonesia. And I believe over 16 to 1,700 people have now passed from that particular earthquake. Eclipses can trigger those types of things. It can, trigger earthquakes or sudden world events. So again, right, that's kind of like a hallmark or a calling card to say, hey, this particular eclipse is something to pay attention to. But weather patterns will definitely be something to pay attention to. So tsunamis, earthquakes in the ocean, right, or those tectonic plates shifting in a major way, creating tsunamis and things that really can shake things up. When afflicted, it can also make us too conservative or really too afraid to confront, face the reality that we need to face. And one thing I would say is this, the thing about this particular eclipse is it's the quiet before the storm. We're about to enter into a very interesting period after Saturn leaves Pisces in the next 2.5 years. And, we'll have a discussion about that through a video coming up on what those implications are when Saturn moves into Pisces in 2027. But nonetheless, right, this is the time for us to be able to say we have an opportunity to get ready for the change that's coming. Aries is new beginnings, but Pisces is the ability to step up, right, before we step out. What we can expect globally is we can definitely, like I stated, we're going to see some erratic weather patterns. Borders in countries will be reorganized, and countries may merge and or separate. You'll be surprised at what's going to happen with regards to the world at large. You know, things are shifting with regards to geopolitics, and borders are a big issue, especially for here people here in America. But it's not just in America; it's other countries as well, and those countries are going to either one, right? I mean, if you look at the Ukraine, it's a perfect example, right? The Ukraine's borders are going to change once this particular war is over. So consider, right, these things are going to change the global structure of things as far as countries are concerned. Oceanic discoveries of new species will be witnessed, right? That's something that's going to be on the positive. Disclosure of alien presence on the planet, I do see that as being something that's going to happen in the next 2 years, right? Not full disclosure, but enough disclosure to where it will almost be undeniable. It'll be dissatisfaction with the rulers of government. You know, when you look at how astrology works, Leo is 6 signs away from Pisces, and Leo does represent world leaders and world governments. So you can consider, right, this may be a time when the people may find that the leadership has been wanton in a lot of areas, and a lot of times this will create, I don't want to say revolutions, but dissatisfaction enough for the people to push back, especially with Saturn retrograding here over the course of the next 2 years. Advancement in space travel. Again, of course, my apologies for the weather anomalies, but yes, something, of course, will happen weather pattern wise. So if you're living, near bodies of water, make sure you protect yourself. If you live in Louisiana or the southern states, or even on the coasts, right? Make sure that you are able to, protect yourself, have water for a few days, food for, lights and things like that. Just, have the ability to sustain yourself for a period of time. How this is going to affect the United States, this does occur in the 4th house of the country. And so we're going to see potentially blackouts on the eastern seaboard, right? Sudden, and I would say more than likely July-ish is when we would see these things. Housing market is going to be affected in a major way, right? Homelessness will increase, right, in a profound manner, right? Because we've got to recognize that the things that are happening here, this is the 4th house of the United States. The 4th house is the home, it's the heartland, it's the core, it's the people, right? This is going to affect America in a major way. Real estate, of course, by proxy, is going to have some unwanted setbacks. The automobile industry also will see a lull and drop in sales and production. The cost of living is going to rise steeply. Right? Rent and mortgages more than half, right? If not, it's going to be so much of the portion of what we have to pay for those of the average person is going to be overwhelming. And you'll see, like I said, a lot more homelessness or people living in more communal areas or communal ways. Helping each other is one of the things that can come out of this, learning to help, learning compassion, learning how to assist others that may not have the same look or identity or sound or what have you than you do. Earthquakes, right, is also something to consider, right? We just saw one in Myanmar. Don't be surprised if you see one here. I would probably venture to say in the next 2 years, the Madrid fault line would get some type of attention, if not definitely on the West Coast. And then the Department of Education is going to be a primary area of concern, change, and reorientation. We're hearing this in the news now about the dismantling of the Department of Education. Education is going to be a big conversation in the next couple of years. Also, social services and domestic policies that aid and assist people are going to come under scrutiny, right? This is just things that have already come up. Just note it's going to be more of it, more conversations and more focus around it. Some pushback as well, right? Agriculture will also be an area that needs to be closely watched, right? As sudden events such as extreme weather anomalies and unstable patterns can affect, crops. So this is also something to consider. Fracking, these are all fourth house matters. The fracking industry may also feel some kickback or some resistance because there may be some things that happen with oil, right, in the future here in the next couple of years. And of course, patriotism will diminish, right? People are going to start to feel this is not working, right? What we have here is not helping the people. And so when people feel dissatisfied, don't be surprised if you see some rioting or some revolting or marches or what have you. That's going to happen more because this is not only, and again, this is not only just the fourth house of America, but there's other implications that show there's some aspects that are going to heighten this particular kind of rebelling up. It's going to be more pressure on the individual states to bear the brunt, meaning Saturn breaks things, and it's the fourth house of the homeland. So expect the states to feel the pressure, not the federal, but the state at the state level or at the local level. This opposes the 10th house of the president and the head of the country, so we need to watch for impeachments, right? And watch for governmental revolts, meaning the government itself may actually internally revolt against itself in the next year or two. Don't be surprised. It's going to square the 7th house, dealing with trade. So trade wars, right, will can create resistance around the world. The 7th house is trade, business, how we as a country do business with other people or other nations. At the time of the eclipse, the ruler of the eclipse will be in the 6th house of adversaries, debt, and disease. This is going to highlight employment. The employment rate is going to be a topic of discussion as well. And lastly, Saturn, right? It aspects Saturn, which is the lord of the 2nd house, which is finances, economy, right? The banking system. So expect some tightness around, the economy here in the next couple of years. I wouldn't say necessarily a major recession, but definitely one that's going to hit our pocketbooks in the practical sense of the word. So scarcity, right? So savings really is going to be something on people's minds in the next upcoming couple of years. And with that, right, we're going to go ahead and pan over to just take a look here, right, at the chart of America. And as I was mentioning, right, this is this particular stellium here, right? Right here, it's lined up. It's across right here from this particular Saturn, which is really going to put a lot of pressure on government, a lot of resistance on how government is functioning. And we can see here in the recent times, there's been some feedback that I'm sure the executive office is hearing that is not savory. This is going to be what we're going to witness. And in intensity, as far as food programs are concerned, that's something we're going to definitely hear about. Don't even be surprised if they talk about seriously removing food stamps as a program, housing, HUD, Section 8, low income. These are all things that are going to affect Americans based on this particular eclipse. Right? And with that, right, we're going to go ahead and say peace. But before we do, again, make sure you hit that like, subscribe, also comment and share the video. We will come back here in the next couple of days with some more information about how this may impact you on a personal level, and also some good information about what Shani's going to do here in Pisces for the next 2 years. So definitely appreciate you tuning in. Please do return and keep your eyes to the sky and ears to the street.